Welcome to the Mo podcast.
A place where individual stories come to life.
This is how we need to be communicating with people. This is how we support people's personal development.
It's important to speak about people believing in people.
The more you're able to let go of your limitation, the more you step into your power, your inner authentic power.
Mo, a place for me, others, everyone. Hello and welcome back to the Mo Foundation podcast. Now today, Alex is going to be talking to the wonderful Zohab Khan, who is going to share a little bit about his story and what brought him to the world of coaching. He's not only a coach, but a poet as well, so you might have some interesting little rhythms to be listening to along the way. And I am just really excited to share this episode with you. I hope that you get as much as I have from listening. Enjoy!
And now we give a big warm welcome to Zohab Khan on the Mo Pod Ventures. And in that Mo way of introducing yourself, would you tell us a little bit about who you are without referencing a job title, your age, or your relation to anyone else?
I am an adventurer, an explorer, a person who really enjoys seeing waterfalls for the very first time. And it's not even just the waterfall, it's that moment of anticipation of, I've just seen a new waterfall. That's who I am. I'm someone who likes to explore, and without putting other people, I don't think I can answer this without putting in relation to other people, because I'm a people person, a person that likes picking little bits of people's brains apart and seeing where my jigsaw puzzle fits with theirs. And yeah, that's who I am outside of all of those confines you've given me.
Wicked, thank you. And that feels like, big values, big ideas. Would you tell us something totally mundane, like one way that you might spend a Tuesday evening on a totally unremarkable week in your calendar?
Cheat. Okay. If we had a cheat day in the middle of the week, it would mean a bag of Doritos, a dip, and just watching something. And it sounds very basic, but I try not. Yeah, that.
Brilliant.
Basic. We're just humans. Yeah.
Absolutely. Life is basic. There's mundane in all our lives. Fantastic. And continuing the introduction, would you give us a brief overview of what you consider work for you at the moment?
At the moment, it is poetry and facilitating people's growth through coaching. It is doing CPD for people and assisting them on how to coach others and how to teach. It's running Mo courses, and exploring all the little things that I can do.
Brilliant. And with that in mind, would you give us a little insight into how your week's structured, like part-time, full-time, evenings, daytimes?
Because I work for myself, there's always a little snippet of time to fill in. So if I'm not working on the next project, I'm going to a gig and performing. If I'm not going to a gig and performing, I'm at a workshop in a school somewhere or university somewhere. If I'm not doing a workshop, what else am I doing? I'm doing some coaching, or I'm running a Mo course, or that's generally the gist. Or then there's also the countless things that I have to write and make sure that I'm on top of those as well. I like to keep myself nice and busy in between the Doritos eating.
Brilliant. And thinking about that work, or kind of moving through different projects or different hats, or having different things on the go and always having something you can fit in on. Get down to some of the details for us. Would you share some of the numbers, how many days a week you work, or what kind of hours you might typically work, and how you've structured your portfolio career to fit with how you want to work?
Ideally, if all things are perfect, if all things I've put the background work in, make sure that I've got all my contracts lined up, ideally, I don't know what, I'd like to work 29 days of the month. Like genuinely, I really, really enjoy like boom, 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 boom. Like I landed back from Australia on mid-January, and from mid-January to just, I don't know, about a week ago, the end of March, I think I had like 2 or maybe 3 days off, which felt incredible. And yeah, it felt absolutely incredible. And now I've got a couple of days off, and we're okay. It's that time to recharge. It's that time to reflect. It's that time to get back into my yogas and my gyms and my this and my that. And but I'm hungry to figure out what's the next thing that I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's maybe no delineation between weekdays and weekends in your schedule. Is that right?
No, it's that's always been the case.
Uh-huh.
I think a great life hack is to not live on the same structures as everybody else. So a weekend,
Mm.
just because you're told you're supposed to rest on the weekend, doesn't mean you have to rest on a weekend, you know? And the reason we've got various reasons of why we rest on weekends, there's religious context, like there's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Each major Abrahamic religion has got their own version of that's the day you're supposed to be resting. And then you've got the 40-hour work week, and you've got industrial capitalism, and you've got all these reasons of why we're supposed to be resting. But it's 2024. All the rules are out the window, and I'm allowed to rest when I need to rest. And I get to work, or I get to invest in my career when I get to invest in my career.
Yeah, and in the immortal words of Craig David and Craig David's scheduled week, the weekend, some of it is, they did rest on Sunday, but there was fluidity, and they're doing things on the Saturdays as well. So happy I finally got to reference Craig David in one of the podcasts.
Oh, it's the dream. I think we could just finish the podcast there. Surely we get
peaked.
better than that. I think we
We're at
peaked.
10
Yeah.
minutes we peaked. And thinking about that, ideally I'd like to work 29 days of a month.
Yeah.
Share with us what rest means for you, or where you find it, if it's not a weekend, as many will typically, as a place many will typically find it.
I'm a huge extrovert, and stereotypically speaking, an extrovert gets their energy and their recharge from being around people. And I love being around people. And because my job is so people centric, of when it's me performing on a stage, or it's me coaching, or it's me delivering a course, I get recharged. I think that's why I can work so much. But then there's a different caliber of getting recharged through people. And that's when you get recharged by your people. These ones are mine. These ones are the ones that know my secrets. And these ones are the ones I know their secrets, and those types of things. So yeah, just spending time with the special people, like whether that's a mate or, whatever, just going to a museum. I love a good, I love a good bro date. Go to a museum, grab a coffee, chill with one of your bros. It's a nice time. Yeah.
Okay, wicked. You've done a lot of work in education, and I have a background before coaching of teaching physics in mainstream education as well. Would you just give a bit of context from yourself of where your work has taken you into schools and other education centers?
It's hard to talk about my coaching in schools without referencing my poetry. And I'm a poet.
Please.
I'm a full-time poet, and I have been. This is year number 10 as a full-time poet, not doing anything else, or not having to need to do anything else. So I'm going to chuck a party at the end of this year. And when I was coming up through my poetry, a lot of teachers would find out about me and say, "Oh, we're studying this poet at school. Would you like to come in?" And that turned into me sharing how I became a poet. And because people are like, do you get paid from that? Are you like, so many times in my life, it's like, oh, you're a poet, like a full-time poet. Is that not just your hobby? And sharing a journey and sharing your means in which you structure your life, and that you can get to that particular point, that turned into motivational speaking. And I utilized other structures that I had learned. And then once I became a Mo certified coach and now a lead trainer, I utilized those aspects, meld them with the aspects that I already have, and then run coaching courses en masse to beautiful young people, and also do CPD for teachers.
Yeah, thank you. And would you share a little bit about where your skills as a trainer, facilitating the coaching course that Mo does, where they're transferable into assemblies, into classrooms?
Great question. I think one of the biggest takeaways that we get, especially you see this moment with new people on the Mo course, some people that have never had any coaching background, maybe they're there because of their work has signed them up, or they've just got a passion for coaching and they don't really know what it is. And the first time they understand the concept of that level 4, level 5 listening, the first time that they understand the concept of open questions, they're like, oh yeah, of course open questions make sense. And when you present open questions to a large audience and you allow them to think about the whats and the hows rather than the whys, rather than why am I like this? Especially if you say it to a kid, yeah, why? Because they've got this pop speaking voice at the back of their head that's so critical of them because they're going through that moment in life. Rather than giving them the whys, you give them the whats and you give them the open questions and you give them a place to facilitate their own growth. That's probably the best thing that's come out of me being a trainer with Mo, of allowing them to think, just to have that extra feather of thinking in my cap.
What's the balance like in the work you do in schools between coaching, holding space, creating that space where people can access the wisdom inside of themselves, versus training or coaching people to use these skills like asking open-ended questions, like listening at a really deep level?
With the younger ones, it's almost definitely coaching. It's almost always facilitating their own growth, facilitating what they can get on the individual scale. And then we transfer that into poetic skills. We transfer that into self-expression. We transfer that into things that can be utilized in academia, because unfortunately, it can't just be, all right, self-development for these lovely people, because they've got syllabuses to tick off. But when it comes to CPD, when it comes to working with teachers, that's when you are instilling the training aspect and teaching those open-ended questions and how to facilitate a coaching structure.
Brilliant. Yeah, I came to the Mo course while I was working part-time as a teacher, and really loved the course. And at that time was quite uncomfortable as a teacher, feeling like I didn't have the time to hold space for students, to work with them one-to-one, to really empower them to find out what they were most about. I felt like I was really having to cram the national curriculum into these students post-COVID, responding to the real challenge there. Or no, mid-COVID, responding to loads of time off curriculum, loads of time teaching remotely, which isn't any real substitute for teaching in person. And then coming to the Mo course, like, wow, this is how we should be connecting with people.
Yeah.
This is the way to be talking to people. This is where I should be listening to a class of 30 students. But also finding it really difficult to do at scale, or difficult to do with a whole classroom. Where have you had real success at creating coaching insights with large groups of people?
I get it in the reflections that I get back from the teachers. So it's the automatic feedback of, that student doesn't usually sit for 60 minutes or 90 minutes and listen to a complete stranger, that too in a vulnerable context. That's probably the most instant feedback that I get of, no, little so-and-so has never sat down for that long of time and listened. Didn't disturb, didn't do anything, didn't hit the person next to them, So I think that's a nice little bit of insight that they can say, here's a man that does something in a certain way and wants the best for you. And I think that's something that lacks in the coaching world sometimes, of either because things aren't framed as well, or maybe because your coach doesn't necessarily always want the best for you.
Right.
Does this person genuinely have my best interests at heart? And the only other time that I can think of, another instance rather that I can think of where you get feedback of the insights that you provided to students, is the feedback that you get later on of like, yeah, we have changed the culture of our school. Yes, year 9 no longer has this lad culture where it's just bullying after bullying after bullying. My favorite group to work with are teenage boys. They're the ones that you can leave the most, at least me being who I am, that's my niche. I can leave little fingerprints inside these kids' brains and change their culture and change the way they think about the other people in their school.
Awesome. And I think that's a really interesting point you raised, that for who I am, I have the most impact on this group. And would you share with us where you feel who you are, or characteristics about you really do speak powerfully to teenage boys?
I am now I will reference all the little labels we put
You just
ourselves.
label yourself. Give us
This
labels.
label. I'm a fourth generation Australian Pakistani poet that lives in London, that raps and plays the didgeridoo and beatboxes, and is a national poetry slam champion and runner-up at the internationals, and like has toured writers festivals and music festivals all around the world. And there's that cool factor. I use air quotes. There's that cool factor, you know, of here is a man that's lived a life, and I make no apologies for it. It's designed in that particular way. I've absolutely made sure that I've lived a life, and that's because of the early life experiences of growing up in a very small country town in the middle of absolute nowhere, and 900 people in the town, 85 students in my primary school. Only kid with a substantial amount of melanin is me and my siblings. And that in a small Australian country town gives you lots of challenges and others you. And by othering yourself, by not thinking of the weekend as the weekend, by allowing your brain to fit outside of the normal structures, I've been able to say, this is what I want to do. I want to be a poet. I want to do this. I want to do that. And inside every single one of us is a dreamer. Inside every single one of us is the guy that wants to travel the world. Every single one of us wants to be a footballer or a basketball player or a rapper or a singer or a dancer or a this or a that, and like roam the globe and do cool things. And in a smallish scale, I've managed to do that as a poet. And I think the reason I work really, really well, I know the reason I work really well with teenage boys is because they see a grown-up version of their dreams. And that's very, very, very carefully cultivated in me to make sure that I'm living for my teenage dreams and my 20s dreams and my 30s dreams and the dreams of me when I'm 60. I'm a dreamer. And that resonates with, I think, everybody, but I think the most change that I can make, at least at this stage in my life, is with those youngins.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I really don't want to mean to typecast teenage boys or stereotype teenage boys, but in some ways it is helpful for us to use that label. Yeah, and you're a man, and most of these teenage boys probably identify as male, and there's probably that link too. So after building that rapport through that, that life story and that trendiness and that relatability, be having proximity to their dreams, what other characteristics of yours do you share with them that they might typically be wary of? And just an example that comes to mind is maybe like vulnerability and sharing like personal things, like sharing feelings. Thing is there anything else like that you're like, you hit them with a 1-2? Here's, I build rapport, and then I share you what I most want to share with you, or the characteristics that feel but also feel really authentically you.
If we were to put another label on myself, it would be a storyteller. And storytelling, I'm working on the next project that I'm working on is utilizing storytelling in a coaching context and utilizing particularly the hero's journey. And when you tell vulnerable stories, when you share aspects of your life with other people, they relate to you, and then they're more inclined to see themselves in those contexts of the hero's journey, in those contexts of, he did it, I can do it. And by showing vulnerability, that too, as a 6 foot tall, 6'6", I've just shrunk myself, as a 2 meter tall man with a big beard, with a big booming voice, there's something about that presence as well. And we all have our version of being a 6'6" bearded brown man. You don't have to be that to get through to them, but I've acknowledged that this is mine. And there's something about vulnerable stories. There's something about telling stories about being at a point where you're bawling your eyes out. Those the way I put it in one of my stories that I share with young people is I'll ask them, have you ever cried? And like, yeah, we've cried. I was like, no. Have you ever cried? And like, yeah, no. I mean, like, have you ever cried where you can't breathe, cry? Like when you're doing like a, and the whole place, they get this, like, they crack up. And there's something about this grown man telling them that you've had a moment, because we've all been there. We've all had that. And to humanize that and to give them the permission to be soft and vulnerable so that they can then be hard and determined and all those opposites, all those antonyms of soft and vulnerable that we have, because I think the world is this yin yang that we need a little bit of both.
Yeah, it feels like a story society tells us is that we can reach power through avoiding vulnerability, or we can reach, by eschewing vulnerability and going for hardness or toughness, we can get to power. And in my experience, I found one of the surest routes to power is through vulnerability. So in sharing my vulnerability and being vulnerable with others, it makes me more powerful, it makes me stronger. And that's a lesson that, it feels really important for young people to be learning. And one that I definitely wasn't teaching in schools as a form tutor and physics teacher. One of the quotes you shared earlier was, oh, yeah, this student doesn't typically respond like this. And it made me think, okay, we've got students behaving differently. And I feel like that might be indicative of how rarely they are treated to active listening. They are treated to those reflective questions where we're allowing them to bring up their own wisdom. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd be inclined to agree with you. Especially as young kids, we as adults tell them what to do. They're always told, you have to go to school and have to wear this uniform and you have to act like this. And, oh, if you don't do this, you're later on in life, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. Better study now. So being constantly told, and we have a telling society rather than a reflecting society, at least for young kids, I think that resonates with them. It lets them explore the inner facets of their mind and lets them build into the human beings that we want them to become into. Majority of the world do not have ill intentions for the next generation. We want the best version of that generation to come so that we can get better and better and better and better as a society. At least that's my goal. I want to, when I tap out of this life thing, I want to have the solid idea and feeling that, all right, this last X amount of years, the world is richer for Zohab Z Khan being here. And we do that through facilitating kids' thoughts by leaving little fingerprints inside their brains. And one of my favorite memories, I'm 12 years old. I'm hanging out with my teacher, Mrs. Blackwell, and she obviously recognized in me that this kid gets bullied a lot. This one he's really quiet, but there's this bubbling fire inside him because that's just who I am, and I'm artistic, and I'm, got all these feelings and got all these ways of expressing myself and all that. So for whatever reason, we're cleaning out the supply cupboard. And that was our job for the day. And I think it was her way of just getting to know me a little bit more. And we picked up a big protractor, like one of those protractors that you're determining the angles of things. And it was one of those big wooden ones. You as a teacher may remember them. And she said, see this protractor? See how big the degrees look, but also small? Even if we just change something for half a degree, it may not seem like that much here, but all the way in the distance, see the other side of the field, it's a huge amount. So all you need to do is make half a degree changes at a time. And in hindsight, that sounds simple and basic and whatever. But to a 12-year-old, that too that's struggling, that too that's having a not so nice time at school, that blew my mind. I was like, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. That is a big distance over there and over there. And it's those lessons, it's those fingerprints inside people's brains, not just young people, but ideally young people, that I try to leave. And that's how we make the world better, because you don't know this retelling of Mrs. Blackwell's story, the little changes that I've made with young people since that story, that's Mrs. Blackwell's legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? One of her many, many great things she's done in her life.
Yeah, thank you. Big shout out to Mrs. Blackwell and teaching about incremental change. And there's this really common story in society that teachers have such an impact on young people. And we all have a memory of a teacher that we can really relate to or that we feel really impacted by.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, how special it might be if we gave these teachers so much more time and space to practice that connection with students, or to give the students more space in that classroom rather than the academic scholarly curriculum that is so typically taught.
Mm.
You've done a bit of one-to-one coaching in schools as well. Would you tell us about how that started?
Yeah, it popped up as an opportunity on the internet, as how these things tend to go. Friend sent it over to me. I applied for the position, and I realized there was a place that I could make a lot of change, and it's something that I am very passionate about. It was a school in South London where I'd go in once a week and work with the same group of students on a regular basis. And I saw profound changes in these kids through coaching, by giving them the space to think and giving them the space to use structures that they're not usually getting. However, I'll be perfectly honest, I found it an extremely taxing and heavy load to create change in a school context, because of all the bureaucracy that also came along with it.
Mm.
But there's two sides of every story. There's two sides of every coin, right? There's the bureaucracy of all the school, and there's only so much time that you've got, and half an hour with a student once a week, there's only so much you can do. But I did my absolute best in that context.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Half an hour once a week. How many
Yeah.
sessions did you typically have with students?
Until it was decided they don't need this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So some students, I worked in that particular position for about maybe 2 years, 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a couple of them I kept all the way through, because they had extra coaching needs that they needed, because there's only so much you can do in half an hour. And then other kids, 10 weeks, one term, on a term by term basis. And then when they return, you'd have a catch up over, what did you do in the holidays? We feel like you don't need coaching anymore. What are your thoughts? They would say, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. So, yeah.
Awesome. And as with so many associate positions like this one, there can often be some involvement by the provider of the coaching, which in this case was the school, and
Mm-hmm.
is different from the clients or the coachee, in this case, the students. How much of what you worked on with the students was allocated or directed by the school?
I was lucky that there was no agenda on the school end. I could utilize that half an hour how I needed to utilize that half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Where the bureaucracy came in was, what did you talk about? How did you use this half an hour with each of these students? And there's that reflection process. And there's obvious safeguarding issues. So that's why that's an integral part of coaching within schools and coaching in places where there's vulnerable people. But it also stilted the conversation with the kids, because it's no longer a confidential space.
Right.
And they know that they can't really talk about everything that they need to. Yeah.
It sounds like you're referencing like report writing or note taking that you had to complete.
Yeah. It was conversations at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was filling in reports, that kind of stuff. It wasn't the biggest deal.
Yeah. And who decided which students had access to that service, that coaching space?
That was the school.
And how much of that coaching felt like it was around well-being?
Maybe 50-50. It depends on every kid. So
Hmm.
obviously I'm a well-being coach, so I push that as an idea and an ideal, and that's my goal. However, there was always behavioral things that we wanted to change.
Mhm.
It's like, well, what? And we all know, well, we as coaches know that when there's an action occurring which is less than desirable in our society, so acting up within school, there's a underlying issue of what's actually going on. Sometimes it's, you know, the kid might be neurodiverse. It could be home stuff. It could be that they're not working as well with particular teachers, and that happens sometimes. It was like, no, no, no. What is it about this kid that's only getting in trouble in this particular class? And sometimes in our life, we're just in the wrong classroom. We're just in the
Mm.
wrong place. It's like, no, we're speaking two different languages. Have you ever met someone that you just didn't like and you don't know why and they don't like you? Happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But unfortunately, these kids don't have the option of be like, no, we're just not going to be friends.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really hear that some students are just in the wrong classroom, and
Mm,
unfortunately that these students have no control or
no.
such little control over how their education journey is structured.
Well, with coaching, they do, because they would tell me and I will try to implement a change
Mm.
because, and that's one of the benefits of having coaching for the troubled students, quote unquote, because the coach can pick up on that and say, kid's fine. It's Mr. Da-da-da that they just don't get along for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Get him out of that classroom. We fine.
This teacher isn't able to meet this student where they need to be met, or isn't able to teach them or make this adjustment, right?
Yeah.
And that outside perspective of you as a non-teacher or as a professional who typically, well, yeah, hasn't been trained in the way that we train teachers,
Hmm.
is a really valuable perspective that then the teachers or the staff at school can hear from, and then change can happen from maybe a different angle than it might have if a teacher was using those coaching skills. Okay. And dream with me for a moment. How would it be if every student in that school had access to that coaching space?
I think it'd be a substantially better school. I think if every kid got access to coaching, magic wand wise, they'd be a lot kinder to each other. They would reflect upon their own feelings a lot better. I think bullying would almost completely be eradicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this old cliche or this thought or idea that we have that when someone's bullying you or when someone's being cruel to you, it has more to do with them than it has to do with you.
Mhm.
It's not because this person doesn't like the insert difference here. It's because there's something internally in this person that they haven't resolved, or there's an ill feeling about who they are as people.
Mhm.
And through coaching, you and I have both seen it, those aha moments. We see it when we train first-time coaches. We see it when we're coaching clients. And that moment of realization, if you can provide it to kids at a young age, that's less bullying.
Mm.
That's less mucking up. That's less, oh, okay, the reason I want to muck up in class right now is because I find learning difficult. And rather than facing the fact that I have these internal ideals about myself that I'm quote unquote stupid or dumb or whatever, I muck up. Nah, let's reflect on that because I've got a toolkit to utilize when those feelings arise in me. Mate, if we can do it on a smaller scale, on a school scale, that can eventually move on to larger scales, to communities and countries and
Mm.
Earth. Ho, ho, ho. That's where the money lives.
Yeah. And really interesting talking about this idea of accessibility with coaching and trying to make coaching as widespread as possible. I definitely agree that coaching has that impact and is a huge force for positive. how much of that impact relies on the coaching happening at a one-to-one level rather than at scale?
I think we can definitely do it on scale. I prefer to coach on scale. I think I get more bang for my buck. The clients even get more bang for their buck because, yes, we can sit there and reflect and give open questions and give that space to think. And that's the best way to coach. But when you do it in a group on a scale basis, there's almost that pressure of let's get on with it. Let's get to that end goal. And rather than taking the scenic route, sometimes in a coaching on scale level, you get straight to the point. You're on the highway. And that's not everybody's ideal way, but you catch 90% of the room. And the 10%, well, we'll figure out somewhere to get them.
Yeah, I might get carried along with the wave or still somewhere caught up in that. Okay. And just thinking of, okay, so Zohab's going to school once a week, and we've got these two different ideas of one where you're coaching one-to-one, and the other where you're coaching at scale, maybe in classrooms, maybe in assembly halls. If they were to bring you in on a weekly basis to coach at scale, what are your first ideas of what that session might look like?
I utilize poetry through that. So that means journaling. That means, yes, I'm coming in every week, but my goal isn't to be their coach for the entire year. My goal is 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we've created great adults that had 1 year of coaching where I came in every single week. So what are the tools that they need that they can self-reflect and they can self-coach? And that's what it looks like. It does look like a lot of poetry. It does look like a lot of journal writing. It does look like a lot of open questions. It does look like structuring lives and saying this part of my life and this aspect of my life is an important part that takes this much energy, whereas I'm not giving enough energy to this part. It's about breaking it down and utilizing various models. So lots of writing.
Yeah, and writing specifically in a manner, in a similar reflective manner to how reflective coaching could be. Is that right?
Bingo.
And where does poetry feel like an important part of that reflective writing practice?
Poetry is the dance of words. It's the way that we let the synapses inside of our head be known to other human beings. You know, it's the ideas that are formulating inside my brain are turning into my vocal cord having a little bit of a dance, which is turning into waves that go into your brain and through your eardrums. And when we break things down like that, and we think of things in a poetic context, and we attach them to the senses, the various senses, not just the five, the various senses that we have, it lets us think in different ways about our own life and gives us a different perspective that we then can take forward into implementing change into our lives. That's where poetry lives.
Yeah, I saw that as you were speaking of that in having to weave creativity, or in doing this in a poetic format, we're weaving our creativity into this reflective process, and that's bringing up all of that, yeah, alternative perspective, all of that looking at things in different ways or reframing it. And when we're conjugating our ideas in different ways, as already happens when you just speak it as plainly as possible, gain a lot of awareness. And then if you're doing that a second time to try and make it also poetic rather than just true, you've got that second layer. Does that sound like I'm on the right path, or you're kind of speaking roughly in your language?
100%. You're speaking in your poetic language, need not be in mine.
Okay, brilliant. Rewind to wherever you were when you first heard about Mo, and tell us about that moment.
It was 2020, lockdown. I had just canceled a bunch of gigs. I think March 2020, like the end of March, I was supposed to be on a plane to China, not too far from Wuhan. And I thought, can I still do it? can I still do these gigs that I need to do? And I think from China, I was supposed to go to Nepal, and I had like a proper, you know, poetic tour planned for that year, and that didn't happen. And my agent, she was also feeling, I've let my clients down. Like, the world is gone, and how are they going to put food on their table and this and that? And part of what she did for me was she got me a life coach. And this life coach happened to be a Mo graduate. And I loved it. It was like, yeah, you're right. Yes, the world is going absolutely to bananas, but here's all the things that I can do. And it wasn't the first time I'd been exposed to coaching, but it was the first time I was exposed to this Mo structure that we use within Mo. And we had conversations about, oh, I think I can do this too. And that's how I found out about Mo.
Okay, awesome. And when you were on the Mo course, are there any standout, vivid memories?
Week 5, well, all of it, to be honest. But week 5, Jeffrey was my lead coach, and there was the limiting beliefs, and I love the way he did the limiting beliefs. I know it's such a small snippet of the course, but there was something about that. I was like, aha, yes, I know this, but he's doing it in his own little way, and that was a really, really cool little moment. But to add to that, it was also the friends that I made on the course, especially at a time, because it was early lockdown. The world was really unsure of itself. And here am I making mates on screens, and I was a keen bean on my course. So you have your regular coaching buddy, you've got your changing coaching buddy, and your external. And I think maybe I had 4 regular coaching buddies. I was like, hey, you want to be my regular? I had nothing else to do. We're all stuck inside.
Yeah.
So I think I was doing like 5 coaching sessions per week as a trainee, of doing my homework 5 times that week, if not more. And that was a big standout, I think, to make friends on a screen. I've never been that gamer kind of guy, and it was nice to have that connection, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the limiting beliefs part of coaching is, I think, where I most enjoy coaching. I think that's a part of coaching practice that feels most powerful or most relevant to me, or maybe that have a sense of ease with. Like, I can hear people's beliefs and already be understanding what a really supportive affirmation might be that underpins or starts to deconstruct that. I've got a really vivid memory I'm going to share from when I first trained on a Mo course. I think it was week 2, and Tony Phillips, who was my lead trainer, I joined them for a demonstration, and they demonstrated how to set an action with a coachee. And the action I set was to take my bike to the bike mechanics and get the wheel looked at, because it was, getting away of this wider goal of cycling more. And I never did it, Zohab.
Have you still not done it?
Well, I mean, my bike's fully functional. I can't remember how it resolved, but I still feel a sense that accountability must have been so strong in that room or in that group, that I still, I was on week 2 of a course, leading a course last week, and I did that demo, and I thought of myself, and I saw this person setting an action. I thought, I never completed that action, and I felt a degree of guilt, of like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, I should have been more. I should have really followed through on that, which isn't in line with that coaching principle of, this is just experimenting with an idea that might get you to where you want to go. And I'm sure Tony would be mortified to hear that I'm still guilty over an action that I set in a demonstration with him. But there you go.
Yeah. Well, I imagine Tony listens to these, and he's mortified right now, I imagine. Nah.
Tony, you're a fantastic coach.
He is a legend of a man, isn't he? I think, to add to, since we're talking Mo, I think Tony was my first person that I assisted on a course for. And the way Tony facilitates and allows for learning to occur is unlike few people that I've ever come across in this reasonably long life of mine. And that is a result of a great man, but also a result of a man that's lived a coaching life, that knows this is how you get the best out of someone. And there's a reason we have, fables written about the great coaches, the great Phil Jacksons and the basketball coaches and the football coaches. And this is, since we're talking Tony and talking his praises, he's one of the great coaches. He's one of the great Mo coaches and the facilitators and the trainers. And that's because he's lived a life of coaching. And we as Mo graduates and lead trainers and whatever our journey takes us on, if we aspire to be anything, I think it is to be great coaches in all contexts of our lives. And if any person is a manifestation or a degree of manifestation about that, it's good old Tony Phillips. So give that man his flowers.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that Tony really seems to embody that pure coaching style, that pure coaching, pure coaching principles, so fully. There was something else I wanted to say on limiting beliefs and that side of coaching. That's the one side of coaching that I really feel I'm able to self-coach around quite powerfully. I can work through questions around the limiting beliefs. Oh, I'm noticing like, oh, this is causing me tension. Oh, that's linked to this kind of belief. Okay. When has this not been true? Asking myself that. And then getting into when has it been true? How is this serving me? How is this holding me back? What would be a more supportive belief? And coming up with some affirmations, some true statements that are more supportive and hold more truth to them. I feel like that's the only part of coaching that I can really do powerfully with myself when I'm trying to do goal elicitation or strategizing. I feel like it's never particularly impactful, but I feel like I often reach similar levels self-coaching around limiting beliefs as when I'm receiving coaching around limiting beliefs from someone else. What parts of coaching do you feel able to have? Do you feel able to self-coach on to a high level?
At the risk of borrowing your answer, yeah, limiting beliefs is one of those things. Especially as coaches, we have that extra insight into, that's a limiting belief. And what would I say if I was working with a client in this context? I think limiting beliefs is a big one. Goal setting and figuring out what you want for your life. And I think the young'uns, the young kids nowadays, those whippersnappers, they call it delulu.
Okay.
A delulu mindset. That's like delusional.
Yeah.
And that may be limiting in its own sense, but in the sense that, absolutely, I can do everything and anything that I ever want, And I've got that as a mindset of I can do all of the things. I want to do all of the things. And having that as a mindset and then utilizing goal setting ideals, that's a place that I coach myself quite well in, of what's the next goal and what's the next goal and what am I getting out of this? What are my clients getting out of this? What are my, shareholders or stakeholders getting out of this? That's an area that I think I coach myself quite well in.
Awesome. Thank you. And are you engaged in receiving any coaching at the moment?
Not at the moment, no. Not at the moment.
And I know you've received coaching before because you and I used to do a coaching exchange with each other. When, if ever, do you feel you might engage in coaching again or feel like having a coach would be the right thing for you?
I think there's never a bad time to have a coach. You can always, if you've got X amount of hours, whatever it's going to be per week, per month, it's always a good time to have a coach. I'm going on tour in July, and it's going to be a 3-4 month tour in Australia and Asia, and just constant shows. It's that back to that 28 days out of 30 days working for about just over 3 months, which is fun. I can't wait. And it would be useful to get coaching on the other end of that, because everything in my life at the moment is working towards that, working towards that, working towards that. I've set the goals, I've set the actions, I've set the things that I know I need to do to get to that point so that I can deliver a completely new coaching program and completely new poetry and completely new shows. That's done. That's getting implemented. And I think on the other end of that, there's something I call post-performance blues. That's when you get off a stage, you've just had a dump of adrenaline and you kind of get sad.
Mm-hmm.
And people get the same thing with their goals. They want to get something, want to get something, want to get something. They want to win the Super Bowl, this, that. They get it and they're like, oh, is this it? And that's a great time to get coaching when you're on top, when you've just kicked a goal. So the next time I'll get coaching is on the other end of that, because I know that I've achieved something great. I've achieved something that I've really, really been putting a lot of work into and hours into. And we think of coaching as a thing that, oh no, my life is a mess, quote unquote, quote unquote. Oh no, this is going wrong. No, do it when things are going excellent so that you can take it to that next level.
To maintain, to push on, to go even further, right?
Yeah.
And it strikes me, this conversation and the podcast episodes in general are often a lot of focus on the past, and we talk about coaching, just focusing on the future. Let's look to the future for a moment and thinking about your own future. How do you think your portfolio career might look in a year or few's time?
I love coaching in a group context. I love coaching large groups of people, being on stage and making a change on a grand scale, and exploring at the moment where storytelling, neuroscience, and coaching overlap is something I'm incredibly excited about. And implementing that in the world is something that we're getting there with. So a year from now, it'll be out there in the world. A year from now, it's going to be a beautiful, amazing thing. So yeah, and forever upskilling yourself and pursuing great things in your life. Like this week, I start acting school. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Brilliant. How does that tie in with the rest of your broad skill set?
It's all life, isn't it? I'm fortunate that I don't have a job. I have a career. And that's a luxury not everyone gets to say. And even fewer people get to say that they absolutely adore their career, because my career is genuinely my life. And I count learning how to act. I count voice modulation. I count new poetic skills on which way to structure a sentence, all as my career, all as my storytelling ideals that I have for the world. And it's a very, very fortunate and happy place to be. Doesn't mean it doesn't take work. Doesn't mean that there aren't bad days or good days or whatever. It just means it's a very, very fortunate thing to be able to do, and to get as many people to do that as possible within our current systems is an absolute huge goal of mine.
Gratitude for the opportunity in front of you. Gratitude for the skills that allow you to provide other people with that same opportunity.
100.
Okay. We'll finish there on that beautiful note of gratitude. Thank you so much for joining us, Zohab.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Always a pleasure, my bro.
And that concludes another end to another fantastic episode. Thanks so much to Alex and Zohab, and really interesting there that Zohab went into the associate contract with the school, and sometimes as coaches we do have this sort of idea that other coaches are doing really well and are enjoying every single bit of it, but actually there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of nuance in what we do, and to highlight that and to look at the world through a poetic lens is something that really hit home for me. Thanks so much for listening, and if you are interested in sharing your own story with the Mo Foundation, maybe you've done a training yourself and would like to get on and have a chat with us, then please get in touch with us. So you can do that by contacting Jane at mofoundation.com. And you can find all of our other episodes online. So they're on the usual places. And you can find a little bit more about Mo on our website. That's www.mofoundation.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye now.